outside the doors. Hopefully you won't need it, but if you do, that's right outside, and there's a water fountain out there. I'd like to thank Senator Mike Groene for joining us this evening, and also we have another senator in the House, and would you like to introduce him, Mike? Okay. Senator Wayne, hiding back there, okay. And he's head of the Department of Urban Affairs, is that okay? Chairman? Okay, thank you for coming. And their group is studying TIF very directly the next few months. So anyways, I'm going to just give a quick agenda, and then we'll let Senator Groene talk. We just want to, some of you don't know maybe what's going on with TIF in Ashland. If you haven't read the paper, I think most of you do though, but we'll just kind of cover that real quickly. If we could bring up the agenda, Colin. So this meeting is sponsored by a group called Ashland Initiative. We're just a small group of citizens that are very concerned about the future of Ashland and our schools. Again, my name is Bob Libby. I'm going to provide a little background on the Whitetail TIF project. Then we'll give the mic to the Senator Groene, and then we'll have a Q&A section. And then we're going to talk about our petition that we've been circulating the last couple weeks. Just a little bit on the procedures coming up. So we need to finish by 8 o'clock. So we just got to focus on TIF tonight. And I know there's maybe some other questions you may have for the senator, but we just got to really stay focused. If he has some time at the end, you know, he'll be, I'm sure, happy to try to help you out there. During the Q&A time, you know, just please address any questions to Senator Groene or myself, and we'll just give you the microphone. If you have a question, just raise your hand and come on up when we're ready for that point. And we're going to try to limit it at one question per person just because we don't have much time. And please refrain from making long statements. Again, we just got an hour and a half here. We want to keep this an informational and civil meeting, so you know, we'll just all, you know, this is just very business and orderly. Just a couple things on the TIF project. So the Whitetail TIF project, for those of you that don't know much about it, it's going to be, in the first phase, there's going to be 50 single-family homes planned. Homes are estimated to cost between $250,000 to $300,000 each. And the Whitetail developers have requested just a little under $1.8 million in TIF financing to help pay for their infrastructure needs. That's going to be water, sewer, roads, and so on to go up there. Eventually, Whitetail could have up to 150 homes and some commercial lots when all the phases are completed. But initially, they're just going to build 50 homes. The City Council has recently blighted the Whitetail area and annexed in preparation for the TIF financing. And essentially, the money on the increment on the increased home values is what's going to go pay for the developer's bond for that infrastructure. The Ashland Greenwood School Board unilaterally opposed the use of TIF for this project because of the effect on the school system, and that was by all the school board members. And the City Council does plan to vote on the TIF agreement on August 17th, so hope you can make that. Next slide. Just a couple things here to point out. Just in my own calculations, this is just a rough draft. If they was to get that little bit under $1.8 million, if you figure interest on that bond, it comes out to about $2.7 million total that will have to go towards that TIF bond. And that's going to affect the school. I don't know if you can see that too well, but it's going to be about $1.1 million in property taxes that's going to be withheld from the school system. The city itself is going to lose just a little under $1 million, and the county will lose about $300,000 over the next 15 years. And so that's a spreadsheet I put together because no one else was providing that kind of data, so I decided to do it myself. Just a little bit of facts on the school system. If you was to go to the next slide. This is data that I got right from the school system. So last year, and the schools are growing. Last year, the school had 887 students. This year, they're expecting 922, so that's a 4% increase, which is a pretty big increase in just 1 year's time. State aid received last year was just a little over $2 million. This year it was reduced by about 500,000, so they're only going to get 1.5 million this year. And state aid is not guaranteed in the future. I think Senator Groene can tell you that, due to budget cuts and so on, they're always looking for areas to cut expenditures. This is from the school. They expect 1.5 students per home in the Whitetail development, and so that's going to be about 75 new students through 50 homes. And if you can kind of do the math, it costs just a little under $10,000 to educate a student each year. So you kind of multiply that out to see what those costs would be. If you could advance. And this is kind of hard to see, but all this red area is what was blighted. That includes part of East Ashland, as well as this big cornfield here that's Whitetail Run. So the city's annexed just a portion of that now, and that's going to be, this is the plot map for those 50 homes where that's going to go. Okay? Where are we? We're clear that way. This is clear on the east side of Ashland, so about that way, about a mile or so. Yeah, we're west. We're clear on the west edge of Ashland. Okay, so let me introduce Senator Groene, if you could bring up the next slide. So Senator Groene, he was born on a farm in Nebraska. He's got a degree in agriculture economics from UNL, lives in Lincoln County, and he was elected to the legislature in 2014. He represents District 42, and he's introduced over 20 bills in the legislature during his term so far. He is the chair of the Education Committee, which is elected by his peers, and he helped stop the expanded use of TIF by leading filibuster. And so he's very knowledgeable about TIF, and that's why we asked him to come here tonight. Actually took Groene out to the Whitetail development to show him the cornfields that have been blighted, and so he's kind of gotten some history on this so far. So, Senator Groene.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say this is Senator Bosselman's district, and he was happy that I was coming tonight. He was going to be here, but he had a brother pass away suddenly, and he, of course, is with family. But why did I ever get involved in TIF? I lived in Colorado, followed my career, and went to Colorado for 10 years. I came back and moved to North Platte, and one of the first things was sticker shock, what happened to property taxes in Nebraska in the 10 years I was gone. But there was a TIF in North Platte. A Menards was coming to town, so I started looking into TIF, and some local real estate speculators. There's a difference between a developer and a speculator. They're the ones that buy the real estate around a community and wait their turn until the development comes and make a good profit on it. Bought an alfalfa field right on an interstate exchange, got their friends on the city council and mayor to blight and substandard the area. They paid $500,000 for an alfalfa field. 2.5 years later, they sold it to Menards for $3.5 million. TIF is not being used what it was intended for in the state of Nebraska anymore. I'll give you a little background on TIF. Those of us that are old enough remember the 60s and 70s. Inner cities were burning. Riots, and we called them slums back then. Omaha, North Omaha was one of the major cities that had the problems. A slum. So somebody in California and Minnesota came up with this idea of, well, let's create this tax increment financing where everybody was building on the donut on the outskirts of the cities, and the inner city was rotting away. And they came up with this idea, well, here's what we'll do. We'll take the additional taxes that are created by development, and if they build on the inner city, we will clear the old buildings, we will put new infrastructure in, new water mains, streets, curbs, remove the old buildings, and we'll tell the developer, build here, not on the outside town. As you see what's happening 40 years later, it's reversed. The building back on the outside of town and using TIF. It's not what it was meant to do. TIF is urban renewal. It's meant to rebuild the deteriorating cities, inner cities. Makes sense. Taxpayers said, well, we'll let you take our school taxes, our city taxes, our county taxes, our NRD taxes, and we will help the city rebuild that inner core. Makes sense. It was never, ever an economic development tool. You can read the entire statutes and not find that term in it. It's redevelopment. It's urban renewal. So if anybody tells you this is economic development, they are wrong. It was never supposed to be used for that purpose. So anyway, why it went to the voters twice, in 1976 and 78. But why did we have to get voter approval to allow TIF and change our Constitution? Because our Constitution says, taxes shall be levied by valuation uniformly and proportionally upon all real property and franchises and defined by the legislature except otherwise provided or permitted by the Constitution. We had to create an otherwise or permitted to allow TIF. So in 1976, they came with the proposal, and it failed. 59% voted against us. And the biggest reason was the schools. The schools were going to use their property taxes, so they organized, the teachers' union organized and defeated it. Came back in 1978, made a deal with the education establishment. Well, what you lose in property taxes, we'll make up in state aid. Worked for a while. Then schools have lately figured out the pie is only so big of money available. If you take property taxes out, that doesn't necessarily mean there's enough state aid to fill that hole. Plus, you have a dollar that the state figures on your local effort rate, but you can charge $1.07 or $1.05 to $1.07. They were losing that 7 cents. And they were losing all the bonded, all the property for bonds to build new schools. So they have finally wised up. We've gone too far with TIF. So the good news is the education establishment is starting to understand, and I guess the schools board here understood what was happening. So anyway, we came with Article 8, Section 12 of the Constitution that says, created the blighted, substandard and blighted property in a redevelopment project for the purpose of rehabilitating, acquiring, and redeveloping. Next slide. If you don't believe me what the intent was, this is what the Omaha World Herald wrote, and the World Herald back then covered the entire state. I mean, back in North Platte, we still get the World Herald. Scottsbluff, every small town had it. The City or Village, on August 6, 1978, they said, in their editorial, they said a city or village could buy blighted downtown property and clear it in preparation for a new structure. That's what it was originally intended to do. The city would buy or condemn an area, remove the old building, put new infrastructure in, and entice a developer to come in downtown instead of building out on 185th and Dodge. Then further on, they said, the ideal is to encourage developers to use downtown or Main Street property instead of building on the outskirts of town. Does that sound familiar? Where taxes and property values may be lower. In other words, it was cheaper to buy a cornfield than it was to buy a bunch of old homes, an old block, and clear it and build new homes. TIF was meant to make sure they could do that. They could develop the old downtown. It's gone 180 degrees the other way with the cornfields again. It was never meant to happen. And then they also said when they endorsed it a day or two before the election, we have recommended passage which would help cities and towns of all sizes develop rundown areas, not cornfields. That's what the people voted on. That's what the people in 1978 thought TIF was going to do and should do. We understood it back then. It's been totally warped. This is by statute. You have an attorney that goes around the state, I think you got him hired here, and has wrote his own version of TIF. I doubt many city council people have ever read the statutes, have ever read them. I know him. He's from my area, Gothenburg. He found his ambulance, and he peddles it across the state. But here's what the definition of substandard is the city council should look at. Substandard areas means an area in which there is a predominance of buildings or improvements, whether non-residential or residential in character, which by reason of dilapidation, deterioration, age, or obsolescence, inadequate provisions for ventilation, light, air, sanitation, or open spaces. You're supposed to have lack of open spaces. You don't TIF open spaces. High density of population, and it goes on. Nothing should be TIF'd unless it fits that description, which I'll get into it later. We have no oversight. We have no state oversight. So you can do what you want. The oversight is this. You hire a lawyer and you sue in civil court. I always say it's like the state putting 75 miles on the speed limit on the interstate and there's no state patrol.